Hi and hello everyone. Welcome back to Improved Version, a channel where we are deeply committed to sharing profound knowledge on holistic personal development through the timeless wisdom found in great books. We are so glad you've joined us today for a conversation that might just change the way you perceive your entire existence. When you read the question that serves as the heart of today's discussion, do you possess Buddha nature? What is the very first thing that comes to your mind? The Buddha taught that all sentient beings, without a single exception, possess Buddha nature, and that everyone has the inherent potential to become a Buddha. This is not just a religious statement. It is a fundamental pillar of Buddhist thought that has been repeated over and over again by practitioners, scholars, and sages throughout history. It has become a timeless truth, echoing through the centuries to remind us of our hidden greatness. Therefore, it is not difficult to see that most Buddhists and those who even unconsciously study Buddhist philosophy understand, at least intellectually, that they certainly possess something called Buddha nature. However, strangely enough, even though many people know the words, very few people truly believe from the bottom of their hearts that they, in their current state, can actually become a Buddha. Some people even go so far as to argue that achieving Buddhahood is a futile endeavor, a goal so distant and lofty that it is practically impossible for an ordinary person living in the modern world. Instead of embracing their potential, they fall into a paralyzing state of skepticism. They might believe they inherently possess this enlightened nature, but they also believe they must engage in endless, grueling practice just to earn or create the state of being a Buddha. When the great teacher Dzongsar Khyentse Rinpoche pointed out this dilemma, he noted that saying "I want to practice to become a Buddha" or "I am pursuing the path of enlightenment to achieve liberation" can actually be somewhat inappropriate or misleading. While these statements might be acceptable in a general sense, they essentially imply a deep-seated misunderstanding. It is like saying, "I want the clouds to clear before the sun can appear." This is a fundamental misconception because no matter whether there are thick, dark clouds or a perfectly clear sky, the sun is always there, shining with the same intensity behind the veil. Buddha nature is exactly the same. The Buddha nature is always within you, fully formed and radiant, right this very second. So, why do so many people still struggle with the belief that becoming a Buddha is a distant dream that requires arduous practice and decades of cultivation? Why do we feel that a very high, almost unreachable level of enlightenment is required to become a Buddha? The truth is that when you lack confidence in something, or when your belief is easily shaken by life's difficulties, it simply means you lack a solid rational basis for your understanding. When a person lacks clear, direct understanding, their thinking is easily influenced by wrong views. Wrong views are incorrect perceptions and deep-seated beliefs that distort reality. These views act like chains, causing a person to be forever trapped in the cycle of suffering and ignorance. To help us dismantle these chains, today in this video, we will be summarizing and exploring the profound content from the book The View and Path of Buddhism by Dzongsar Khyentse Rinpoche. You may recognize him as the author of the famous book What Makes You Not a Buddhist, which I previously introduced in another video on this channel. That work was incredibly well received and served as an enlightening guide for many people seeking a modern perspective on ancient truths. Dzongsar Khyentse Rinpoche is a prominent Lama of the Sakya lineage of Tibetan Buddhism in Bhutan, holding the title of the third incarnation of the Khyentse Wangpo lineage. As the saying goes, books and people meet by chance, and this work reaching you today is no different. It is a meeting of destiny. This book offers an incredibly insightful, concise, and comprehensive analysis of the most fundamental concepts in Buddhist philosophy. Our content today will focus on summarizing and conveying the very essence of the book to clarify 3 major issues that affect us all. The first problem we will address is how misunderstandings about our own nature causes perpetual physical and mental suffering. The second point we will explore is the underlying cause of those specific misunderstandings. And finally, the third point will reveal the core way to dispel the clouds of ignorance and allow the Buddha nature within you to finally shine through. It is my sincere hope that a correct understanding of these core philosophical concepts will allow you to dismantle the heavy layers of prejudice you may hold against yourself. This understanding can contribute to the opening of your inner wisdom, helping you return to the right path on your spiritual journey and thereby achieve true liberation and lasting peace of mind. Now, please listen closely as we dive into the common misunderstandings about Buddha nature that cause you such endless suffering. Buddha nature is the central concept in Buddhism, yet it is almost universally misunderstood into opposing and equally dangerous ways: the view of eternalism and the view of annihilationism. To start, we must ask, what does eternalism mean in this context? It usually refers to the belief that things are eternal or unchanging. Those who cling to conventional, eternalist views believe that their personal existence or a specific entity truly exists in a permanent way. Simply put, it means that the person believes in the existence of a supernatural entity or a soul that remains constant through time. That entity could be a deity, a specific version of a Buddha, a bodhisattva, or any supreme being. People often believe these higher beings possess the absolute power to bestow blessings and grace upon sentient beings, helping them achieve worldly success, fame, and abundant fortune. However, the problem is that such a view will only increase one's belief in the ego, or what is known as self-centeredness. When you believe that there is an external, sacred force protecting and guiding you, your consciousness automatically separates the world into a subject and an object. If gods or Buddhas are out there bestowing blessings, then there must be a subject here meaning me to receive that protection. That subject is the ego within you, the self that you mistakenly believe is experiencing this life, possessing this body, and owning your fame or possessions. This belief makes people become stubborn and deeply dependent on external forms of religious practice, such as ritualistic prayer, material offerings, or seeking out fortune-telling to find certainty. In this state, they place a massive emphasis on outward rituals while completely neglecting the transformation of their own consciousness. If something good happens, they think that a Buddha has blessed them personally. If they encounter misfortune, they believe it is karmic punishment from an external force. Gradually, we stop looking within ourselves to transform our own minds, clinging instead to an ego that desperately feels it needs saving by something outside. This leads to fear and illusions of salvation from the outside, instead of returning to the true wisdom and liberation that can only be found within. If eternalism is the clinging to an unchanging essence, then its extreme opposite is annihilationism, also known as nihilism. This viewpoint leans towards a complete severance of belief in anything beyond the material world. It is a total rejection of the understanding of Buddhahood, the laws of cause and effect, or the reality of karma. To sever the connection in this way means to believe that non-existence is the only truth. Dzongsar Khyentse Rinpoche explained that annihilationism refers to those who believe that non-existence actually exists as a final state. The non-existence here refers to the denial of Buddha nature and the dismissal of karmic forces. Those who cling to the view of annihilation believe that all these spiritual laws are merely abstract, man-made concepts that do not exist in the real world. They only believe in what they can directly perceive with their 5 physical senses. According to them, everything, from the formation of the vast universe to the birth of each individual human being, is simply a matter of random chance. They don't believe in an afterlife, and they certainly don't believe in the continuation of consciousness after death for them. Death is the absolute end. Therefore, these people often deny the importance of spiritual practice, believing that it solves nothing. Naturally, they consider the idea of becoming a Buddha to be an extremely distant, impractical dream. Both eternalism and annihilationism are extremes that lead to a distorted understanding of Buddha nature. One side argues that Buddha nature is a thing of eternal joy that can only be attained through diligent practice. On the other hand, the nihilists argue that it is something abstract and completely impractical. However, upon closer observation, we see that both stem from the exact same root, the belief in a definite, existing self. It is this ego that tries to determine whether or not the Buddha nature exists, and so both of these viewpoints still cannot escape the dualistic division of the mind. The true nature of things is not created by anything we do. It is not the result of a process. It completely transcends the laws of cause and effect. Rinpoche suggests that we must abandon all our preconceived notions and simply view our true nature as a natural state that remains when all our ignorance finally disappears. We need to understand that our own ignorance is not something that truly exists in a permanent way. It is essentially a product of impermanence itself, arising only because of specific causes and conditions. This means that if you can control and weaken the causes that give rise to your ignorance, or if you can strengthen the factors that counteract that ignorance, then eradicating it is entirely possible. Remember that anything in this universe that is created can also be destroyed. Only the Buddha nature, which is neither born nor subject to death, is already present within you. Buddha nature is not born because you decide to practice, nor does it disappear because you doubt it. If ignorance and evil deeds are completely eliminated through awareness, then something fundamental will remain. That remaining state is what we commonly call wisdom, the fundamental good nature, the state of Buddhahood. Since Buddha nature is the state that is revealed when ignorance disappears, and since our true essence is not the ignorance itself, we are, by definition, already Buddha nature. That is the true nature of all of us. So, the next logical question we must ask is, how do we actually eliminate this ignorance? Ignorance, understood correctly, is the lack of understanding of the true nature of life. In the system, the ego is essentially the most fundamental form of ignorance. The ego is a labeled illusion, a collection of parts that we mistakenly believe to be a single, solid thing. Think about a car. A car is just the name we give to a collection of components, the wheels, the engine, the chassis. Only when all of them are put together in a specific way do we call it a car. If you were to take those parts apart, the car would cease to exist. The ego is exactly the same. According to Buddhist philosophy, the self is merely a temporary label we attach to the combination of the 5 aggregates. First, there's the aggregate of form, which refers to your physical body. Then there's the feeling aggregate, which includes your basic sensations of joy or pain. The perception aggregate involves your ability to recognize concepts like sound, smell, and taste. Next are the volitional formations, which include your psychological impulses and your attention. Finally, there's the consciousness aggregate, which is the raw perception through your 6 senses: sight, hearing, smell, taste, touch, and the mind itself. If you consider the sensations coming from any one of these aggregates to be solid or certain, then you will naturally believe that the self has a real foundation. But when the ego believes it has a real foundation, it will always seek to assert and defend its existence. This is why our lives are often filled with arrogance, a lack of deep security, and a constant fear of losing what we possess, whether that is property, territory, position, or relationships. Everything the ego strives to achieve is done solely to reinforce its belief in its own existence. Even the outburst of intense emotions is just another nuance of the ego trying to feel real. For example, when you yell in anger, the object of your anger becomes very clear, and that helps reinforce the illusion that your ego is real. Even the emotions of being intensely in love work through the same mechanism. When we fall in love with someone, we often fall into a trap. The common definition of love is deep concern for another person and a willingness to make sacrifices. But in reality, much of what we call love is just another way for the ego to seek validation. The ego often only loves itself. It doesn't truly see the other person. It is so focused on itself that it only pays attention to whether that person meets its specific needs, desires, or expectations. For example, when you say "I love you," you're often unconsciously asking, "Do you love me back?" You're saying, "I want to possess you to prove that I exist." In this way, the ego within you becomes a hunger that can never be satisfied. It constantly demands your time and energy. Only when you begin to relinquish your ego and enter a state called egolessness can true, unconditional love emerge and ignorance finally disappear. So, how do we let go of our ego? Letting go of the ego does not mean you have to reject all the emotions and thoughts that come from being human. What we need to let go of is the attachment to those things and the mistaken belief that the self experiencing them is a solid entity. As it is often said, it is not the phenomena that deludes you, but your attachment to the phenomena that deludes you. We need to understand that the ego is always seeking things that can prove its certainty in this world. But the truth is that we live in a system that is inherently impermanent. If we keep searching for certainty in an impermanent world, the result will always be suffering. Instead of saying that the ego is striving to solidify its existence, a more enlightening way to express it is that the ego within you is actually searching for the causes of suffering. Only when you stop searching and stop creating those reasons for suffering will your ignorance gradually disappear. Then, you'll realize there is absolutely nothing left to achieve and nothing left to add to yourself. You will see that your true state is already complete. Buddhist wisdom is not a distant goal. It's always been there. As soon as the veil of ignorance dissipates, you naturally reveal your inherent awakened awareness. The remedy that the Buddha prescribed to help us escape this cycle is the Four Noble Truths. These are the path to enlightenment and liberation from pain. The Four Noble Truths are often misunderstood as a pessimistic message, meaning life is just suffering. Many people think this means they should just accept a life of pain. But in Rinpoche's teaching, the core understanding of the Four Noble Truths must be knowing suffering. It is like a medical diagnosis. For example, if you have a toothache, you must first be aware that you are in pain in order to find a way to treat it. The problem is that your suffering is not simply about obvious physical pains. A large part of our suffering is something we are not even aware of. We even mistake suffering for joy. For example, the frantic pursuit of status or material possessions. While these feel good for a moment, they are still part of the cycle of suffering because they are based on a fleeting illusion. In Buddhist philosophy, this is the suffering of change. It is the process of possessing things without understanding their true nature. Because most people do not fully understand the nature of suffering, they pay no attention to its root causes. You only realize the truth when the pain becomes too overwhelming to ignore. Humans always try to eliminate their pain, but without wisdom, we often just replace one form of suffering with another. It's like when someone is heartbroken and immediately rushes into a new relationship just to forget the past. They think this will bring them happiness, but they are just setting themselves up for more disappointment. We keep repeating the same story with different scenarios. Each time we tell ourselves, this time it will be happiness, but it always ends in an ease. The Buddha taught that our ego itself is the source of this suffering. Therefore, to escape, we must acknowledge that the ego is the problem. This is the first truth, the truth of suffering. The second truth is the truth of the origin of suffering. This explains why we suffer. According to Buddhist philosophy, there are 3 types of suffering that intertwine. First, there's the basic pain of ignorance and the constant desire to grasp an independent self. This craving and attachment keep us trapped in the cycle of birth, aging, and death. The ego is very cunning. It uses distraction tactics to keep us from seeing the root cause. It wants us to focus all our attention on the symptoms of our life, forgetting to address the disease itself. The third truth is the truth of the cessation of suffering. Ending suffering isn't about using a magical method to make reality go away. Rather, it is the moment when you fully understand that your suffering doesn't actually have an inherent, permanent existence. If suffering were truly a part of your fundamental nature, you could never eliminate it. But the Buddha taught that the disease is not who you are. Once you are convinced that suffering is not your true nature, you can apply the appropriate methods to transform it. Finally, the fourth truth is the truth of the path, the roadmap to complete liberation. This path teaches us to abandon the bad habits the ego has accumulated over countless lifetimes. When you reflect on this, you realize that letting go isn't actually a big or difficult thing, because the things you're giving up never really existed in the first place. One truth we rarely realize is that the root of our misery stems from our tendency to over-dramatize our problems. Your ego is always deceiving you by forcing you to live in the future or the past. It wants you to obsess over what you will do tomorrow or plan for a happy retirement. It constantly expects others to meet its needs. Because of this, when you face an undesirable situation like someone interrupting you or getting stuck in traffic, your ego reacts with immediate anger or anxiety. It's like a screaming child demanding to be the center of the universe. In doing this, we inadvertently sow more seeds of suffering. At times like these, what we really need to do is take a deep breath, smile gently, and tell ourselves it's not that serious. This simple statement holds immense power. Anyone who can truly say it's not that serious about any matter in life has essentially embarked on the path of liberation. This is called renunciation or detachment. A detached mind is one that has broken free from the ego's tendency to overemphasize problems. It is able to view life with a light-hearted perspective. At this point, you might wonder, if I consider everything unimportant, won't I become indifferent towards life? But remember, renunciation doesn't mean giving up on life. It simply helps you stop spending your entire life doing meaningless, ego-driven things. It helps you realize that the things you're so stressed about bring you no real benefit. Essentially, you're letting go of your obsession with a self that doesn't actually exist. So ask yourself, how much time do you really have left? People live in the illusion that death is a long way off, even though the truth is that death is a possibility in every single moment. We build secure lives with big houses, but we cannot foresee our final breath. The ego clings to the belief that I have plenty of time and to sustain this illusion. It leads us to obsess over wealth and fame as if these things could shield us from the inevitable. But this is the paradox of ignorance. The more we run away from the truth of death, the more we lose our awareness of the fragile beauty of life. A fleeting life is like a water bubble, ready to burst at any second. We have lived so many lives like this without even knowing it, because the ego doesn't want us to realize our own fragility. But if you realize right now that you don't have much time left, you will begin to cherish the present moment. You will turn every event into an opportunity for spiritual practice and the transformation of your consciousness. As the clouds of ignorance gradually dissipate, a voice of urgency will begin to resonate within you. You will say, I don't want to live in the virtual world my ego creates. I need to change my habits. Rinpoche taught that true reverence is not blind obedience, but the result of questioning and personal experience. You can have all the knowledge in the world, but if you don't practice it, it is only false reverence. In reality, the person who needs your reverence the most is the pure soul already residing within you. There's a river of wisdom flowing beneath the soil of your ignorance. Be respectful to yourself by avoiding wrongdoing. When a moment of enlightenment dawns, urging you to escape the labyrinth, you will realize that greed and anger are just bad habits. The best tool to break free is to replace your bad habits with good ones. The most essential habit for liberation is cultivating a detached mind. Start small. Spend just 1 or 2 minutes each day contemplating impermanence. Look at the ego and see its illusory nature. When the ego starts to squander your time chasing fleeting pleasures, or when it gets angry over material things, just withdraw, stop clinging to those thoughts. Smile gently and say, what's the big deal? Eventually, you will realize that your suffering is not you, and you're not your suffering. You will walk through life effortlessly, working and experiencing everything without getting bogged down. That is the stepping stone to absolute freedom. We don't need to find more light. We just need to clear away the mist. Buddha nature is an experience that happens when we dare to stop chasing, to stop creating negative karma, and to stop over-dramatizing our lives. Be like the grass. Don't strive to grow taller than the ground and don't fear the wind. Simply be yourself in each moment. That is the deepest meaning of the question. Do you have Buddha nature? When a child finally realizes that the ghost in the dark room is just a coat hanging on a hook, the fear disappears instantly. Enlightenment is not a mystical state. It is simply the cessation of illusion. You don't need to become someone else. You just need to recognize that your ego is merely an actor performing on the stage of life. So, are you ready to enter a state of egolessness and find your true home? Are you ready to let go of the big deal and find the peace that has always been yours? We would love to hear your thoughts and reflections on this journey. Please leave your comments below and share your experiences with us. Thank you so incredibly much for spending this time with us today on Improved Version. If you found this discussion helpful or if it provided you with a moment of clarity, please share it with friends, family, or anyone who might need this message. Don't forget to give us a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on all notifications so you never miss our weekly explorations into the books that nourish the spirit. Your support helps us keep sharing this profound knowledge with the world. Thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you in our next video. Until then, take care of your mind and stay present.